It's time to do a history lesson on the last 40 years of the best offensive players in the NBA. Welcome in or welcome back. I've been working on this one for a very long time, so sit back and relax. I'm sure you're asking yourself why I would take it upon myself to do all this extensive research, and the short answer is, when I commit to something, I have to see it through. The NBA MVP debate this year really bothered me as far as this discourse was concerned. Nikola Jokic is obviously one of the greatest offensive players that we have ever seen, but I didn't believe in my heart that he was the deserving MVP for this year. I think there are plenty of factors that go into it. Team success, your defensive ability. There were things that I think SGA deserved more to win the MVP, and thankfully for me, he did. And this discourse cemented in me the idea and the notion that the most valuable player and the best offensive player are not the same thing. And then I thought to myself, this didn't apply to just this year. This happened multiple times before, I'm sure, so I have to find out who was the best offensive player for each year. So that's the why of this video. Now we need to get into the how. The how is I've created my own formula to determine the offensive player of the year, and I'm calling it the Roundball range. Why? I like alliteration. It's got 5 different categories of offensive production numbers that I want to incorporate into my formula, and I'm going to break them all down for you. PRA stands for points, rebounds, and assists. It is a sum of all 3 of those individual counting stats into one number. The points and the assists are pretty self-explanatory. They generate an offense, they generate points for your team, and those are obviously offensive production numbers. Now the rebounds, I understand, could be contentious. I don't view rebounds as a defensive or an offensive stat. I just view them as stats. Because when you break it down, you can get an offensive rebound to create another opportunity for your team, or you can grab a defensive rebound and turn that into quick offense. I feel like they are the same kind of rebounding stat, so I am lumping them into this overall PRA stat. The ORT stands for offensive rating. It is an estimate of how many points a player could score given 100 possessions. The true shooting percentage, I feel, is the more encompassing stat of the efficiency parameters. I will not be angry if someone still uses the effective field goal percentage, but in my purview, your free throws and your ability to get free throws and make them matter, so that's why I included true shooting percentage. And then we have offensive win share. It's an estimate of how many wins you attributed to your team because of your offense. And then we have your offensive box plus minus. It's an estimate of how many more points you attributed to your team when compared to a league average player. So you add the sum of all of those numbers up, divide it by 5, and then you have your round ball range. And whoever has the highest round ball range of any given season is your offensive player of the year. A couple of housekeeping things before we jump into the numbers. Why did I start in the 1982-1983 season? It's pretty simple. That's when they decided to give out the first Defensive Player of the Year award, and I figured that was a good place to start tracking the numbers. And what are my expectations per this experiment? I don't really know if I have any, but I do kind of expect the true hoops, the real hoopers, to be here. The T-Macs, the Melos, the KDs, the Kobes. I expect them to be on this list a lot. The NFL has had an Offensive Player of the Year award since 1972, and it's about time that the NBA caught up as well, so let's jump into it. For each year, I'm going to be looking at the MVP voting. I will take some liberties on it if there is a defensive player that should not technically belong here, the likes of a Rudy Gobert. I know that I've omitted him a couple times in the latter portion of the MVP debate, so I have taken some liberties on it, but these are mostly based on the top 10 MVP ratings per year. The 1982-1983 season, a couple years before the arrival of Michael Jordan, so let's see who can grab this crown prior to his ascension. We've got some usual suspects here. Magic Johnson wins the first ever Offensive Player of the Year award, and it makes sense. He was leading that Lake Show offense. He had the ball in his hands a lot. He was 6'9", so he was grabbing a lot of rebounds. This makes sense. But I also wanted to make mention of Moses Malone, who had great rebounding numbers that year, so that's why his PRA is very high. And then also, shout out to Artis Gilmore, Chicago Bulls legend, for getting 3rd. The 1983-84 season, I'm not going to lie to you. The second year I looked into data, this year right here, almost made me give up this idea entirely because I did not expect Adrian Dantley's name to be here. And I mean that as respectfully as possible. He had a hell of a year. The highest offensive rating in the league, great PRA numbers. I just didn't expect him to be here with the likes of Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Bernard King, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. But the first ever winner of this award gets 2nd this year, followed by Bernard King. Shout out to Bernard King. 1984-1985, Michael Jordan has arrived, and he has already made a name for himself, grabbing the 3rd place award for this year. But he just couldn't beat out who were the greatest to ever do it. 2nd place going to, again, Magic Johnson, and 1st going to Larry Legend. It was about at this point that I realized how many cool names were on this list. Players that I hadn't necessarily thought of in a long time, like Alex English and Sidney Moncrief. It was really nice to see lists like this. And Maybe down the line, some of those cool names will win this award. But for the 85-86 season, Magic Johnson has reclaimed his crown, followed by a great showing from Larry Legend and the aforementioned Sidney Moncrief grabbing third. This is what I'm now calling the Magic Johnson era. The 86-87 season saw him grab another Offensive Player of the Year award. He's starting to make his own personal dynasty. And then we have a pair of Celtics to grab the second and third spots with Larry Legend and Kevin McHale. 1987, 1988, or what I'm going to call the arrival of his airness. Michael Jordan grabs his first Offensive Player of the Year award, followed by Charles Barkley and again Larry Legend. Back to back like I'm Jordan, 96-97, or in this case 88-89, Jordan grabs his second consecutive Offensive Player of the Year award, followed by offensive powerhouse Charles Barkley, and then still sticking around, still kicking in the latter portion of his career, Magic Johnson. Now, I hope with all this data, even though it is a lot of numbers, you're starting to notice some patterns here. A truly great statistical season is kind of earmarked with a 50 in your Roundball range. So when we start creeping up into the high 40s and the 50s, it is a truly great offensive season. And that is cemented by the fact that we have two players with a 50 or higher Roundball range. The winner of this award this year being Charles Barkley with an even 51, and not too far behind him, Michael Jordan. And barely missing the 50 mark, we have Magic Johnson yet again. Who would have seen this coming? Michael Jordan grabs another one again in the 1990-91 season, followed by Charles Barkley, and guess who? Magic Johnson. Is it starting to get old yet? Michael Jordan grabs another one, followed by Karl Malone and David Robinson. Red alert, we have our first three-peat of this award. Michael Jordan grabs a third consecutive Offensive Player of the Year award. Now, this year in particular, I did think it was pretty interesting because Karl Malone finished 8th in MVP voting, but 2nd in the Offensive Player of the Year award, followed by Charles Barkley, who did win the MVP that year. Now, I can already tell there's going to be some contention here. The 1993-94 season, Michael Jordan retired. He went to go play baseball. So there's a huge asterisk somewhere, not just for the championships that the Rockets won, but potentially this award too, because a little baby Shaquille O'Neal grabs his first ever Offensive Player of the Year award with 48.74 Roundball range. Second, we have his mortal enemy, perhaps, in David Robinson. And then a dead even tie for third place, we have Karl Malone, and then the MVP of that year, Hakeem Olajuwon. The 1994-1995 NBA season, the first season that I was alive, got to see David Robinson win the Offensive Player of the Year, followed by John Stockton leading the Utah Jazz out west, and then Shaquille O'Neal finishing in third. The King has returned in full for the 1995-96 season because Michael Jordan wins the MVP award and the Offensive Player of the Year, followed by a valiant effort from David Robinson, and shout out to Penny Hardaway, did not expect to see you here this early. Do you know how the awards in the NBA are named after players? Like the MVP trophy is now the Michael Jordan MVP award? Well, I thought about doing that with this award as well, but it turns out that it still needs to be the Michael Jordan Offensive Player of the Year award because he wins another one this year, followed by Karl Malone, who did win the MVP this year, and then Glenn Rice. Didn't expect to see you here either. Has Michael Jordan fallen off? He's placed third this time in the 1997-98 season, losing out to Shaquille O'Neal, who came in second, and Karl Malone, who finished first. All right, we have reached the second retirement of Michael Jordan. I'm going to spoil it now. We will not see Michael Jordan win any more awards from here on out. So Michael Jordan's reign of terror is over. But depending on how you feel about him, we have another reign of terror because Shaquille O'Neal is about to go on an historic run. In the 1998-1999 NBA season, Shaq finished 6th in MVP voting, but walked away with the Offensive Player of the Year award. Karl Malone, who did win MVP, gets 2nd, and then we have Jason Kidd to round out 3rd. Remember that reign of terror I was talking about? More evidence. Shaquille O'Neal wins again, back to back. Karl Malone is sticking around, unfortunately, with the 2nd place finish. And I did want to mention Gary Payton finishing 3rd. We kind of view Gary Payton as this defensive guy, but this year in particular, he was slinging the rock. That's why his PRA is so high. Back to back to back, we have another 3-peat by Shaquille O'Neal. And then we have Kobe Bryant, who finished 9th in MVP voting, but 2nd in this award. Really goes to show how unfair both of them on the same team was. And then we have Karl Malone to finish 3rd. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a 4-peat. Shaquille O'Neal, unsurprisingly, wins another one. Followed by the greatest European big man to ever do it, Dirk Nowitzki, finishing 8th in MVP voting, but 2nd here. And then Tim Duncan, who did win MVP, finishing 3rd. 2002-2003, the year before LeBron comes into the league and changes history forever. Who wins that year? Tracy McGrady. Finally, one of those true hoopers that I thought was going to be littered over this list finally shows up and wins the award. Shaquille O'Neal potentially falling off. Don't get your hopes up. finished second. And then for third place, again, we have Dirk Nowitzki. 2003, 2004, one of the greatest draft classes ever, and LeBron James has showed up, finishing 9th in MVP. Doesn't place on this award, but I did want to mention the fact that a rookie finished 9th in MVP voting. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Peja Stojakovic, but I didn't expect him to be here. I know that he was hooping this year, but I didn't realize to what level he was hooping. It does hurt my heart a little that the year Kevin Garnett wins MVP, my favorite player of all time, the year that he wins MVP, he can't get the Offensive Player of the Year award. I know that he was never really an offensive guy, but I really wanted it just one time, and this was his best shot. And then in third, we have Kobe Bryant. Now, I know that I've kind of rushed through those first 20-ish years of this award. I needed to, because now, this 2004-2005 season was the first year that I started to watch basketball. So not only do I have the numbers in front of me, but I have the historical context to add to the fact. This is the second time this video that I thought that I messed the formula up. Amari Stoudemire, who I loved growing up, finishes 9th in MVP voting, but wins the Offensive Player of the Year award. And his running mate, Steve Nash, did win the MVP, but placed third in this award. What really did it for Amari Stoudemire to place over his teammate Steve Nash, who won the MVP, was his rebounding numbers. He had a higher PRA than Steve Nash, and his offensive win shares was just slightly higher to edge him out. So to recap, first place we have Amari Stoudemire, second place we have Dirk Nowitzki, and then third place Steve Nash, your MVP. LeBron James has heard of disrespect, and he is coming for that award, just not this year. First place goes to Dirk Nowitzki. But in 2005-2006, LeBron does tie for second in this award, tying with Chauncey Billups. As I'm looking over this, still some very cool names, a little throwback to the past that I didn't expect to be here. Elton Brand finishing in the MVP race. Shout out to Elton Brand. Coming off two back-to-back MVPs, we have Steve Nash winning the Offensive Player of the Year award, even though he did finish second in MVP voting, and then we have Dirk Nowitzki, followed by Kobe Bryant finishing third. Again, some really cool throwback names. Gilbert Arenas, Carlos Boozer, shout out to those guys. Amari Stoudemire wins his second Offensive Player of the Year award, and it's really just due in part to his individual offensive rating. 124 is insane, especially for this portion of history. We're going to get into some higher numbers later, but 124 at this point is insane. And then we've got the point guard Chris Paul, followed by LeBron James. 2008-2009, LeBron's first MVP, LeBron's first Offensive Player of the Year award. And then for second and third place, again, we have the point guard Chris Paul, followed by LeBron's future running mate, Dwayne Wade. I remember watching this season live thinking that Dwayne Wade had a really good opportunity to win the MVP award. It kind of blows my mind that he finished third here, but who knows? And then again, a really cool name to just think about and how good they hooped, Brandon Roy. LeBron James back-to-back MVP, LeBron James back-to-back Offensive Player of the Year. But I hope you're noticing something. Kevin Durant, little baby Kevin Durant, finishing second in this award, followed by Steve Nash, still the leader of that 7 seconds or less Suns offense. 2010-2011, LeBron James leaves Cleveland for the Miami Heat, and no one wants to vote for him for MVP because he's bad for the league and he's a villain. Derrick Rose wins your MVP this year. I still think that's very valid, even though I think LeBron James probably could have been higher than Dwight Howard. But for some small consolation prize, he does win the Offensive Player of the Year. For a third year in a row, mind you. And then we have eventual Finals MVP Dirk Nowitzki finishing third and Kevin Durant finishing second again. All is right in the world. LeBron James is winning MVPs again, and he's still winning this award. Here is your LeBron James reign of terror. Now, this 2011-2012 season, we are in the middle of a lockout. Things are a little weird. We didn't start until like December. We have a brand new Chris Paul in the Clippers uniform running that Lob City offense, who finishes second, and Kevin Durant for a third straight year finishes in the top three. 2012-2013, the best basketball player that I've ever seen with my own two eyes, LeBron James, wins his fourth and unfortunately final MVP award. But not to worry, LeBron, you're walking away with more hardware. Here you go, another Offensive Player of the Year award. Chris Paul, again, leading that Lob City Clippers team to a third place finish in this award, and then Kevin Durant, again, almost winning, but not so fast, second place for you. Ladies and gentlemen, he did it. Kevin Durant broke the glass ceiling, and he is now an Offensive Player of the Year award winner. And I was there for the whole thing. That 51 round ball score is legit. He was the best offensive player by a very wide margin that year. You couldn't even come close. Although people did try, LeBron finishing second and Chris Paul again finishing third. The babyface assassin has entered the chat. Steph Curry wins this year's Offensive Player of the Year award and the MVP. Chris Paul is trying his damnedest to win this thing, but he keeps falling short. Second place for him. And we're starting to finally see the ascension of the Houston Rockets, James Harden. He gets third place. Unanimous MVP, unanimous Offensive Player of the Year. Steph Curry, 51.64 round ball range. I can't stress how important that is because that entire year, He rarely played the fourth quarter. So this score could have been so much higher had he even played fourth quarters, but we're lucky that he didn't because this was a boat race. Future Steph Curry teammate Kevin Durant finishing second place, and James Harden finishing ninth in MVP voting but third in this award. He will get his time soon enough. Like right now, for instance, the 2016-2017 season, Russell Westbrook averages a triple-double. I really thought that that would have propelled him into the conversation for this award because of the PRA stat, because of his offensive rating. But alas, James Harden walks away with this one. And I think we all remember what happens in this season. Kevin Durant goes to the Golden State Warriors, and he also becomes a villain. No one wants to vote for him for MVP because he's part of this super team that is the Golden State Warriors. But he does finish 10th in MVP voting and second in this year's Offensive Player of the Year award. And then we've got LeBron James re-entering the conversation with a third place finish. 2017-2018, all three of that Thunder trio from that 2012 finals have finally won an MVP award, and James Harden wins the Offensive Player of the Year. Still wrecking teams, still ruining the league. Steph Curry finishes second in this award and 10th in MVP voting, and then LeBron James again with a third place finish. 2018-2019, a very highly contested MVP award. James Harden went on the campaign trail and said that Giannis shouldn't be able to run and dunk and win the MVP award. He does, but again, some small consolation prize. James Harden walks away with his hardware as well. MVP Giannis does finish second, and then for third, we have Kevin Durant. Name I did not expect to be here alert. Damian Lillard, 8th place finish in MVP. First place in our heart for this award. And then we've got James Harden finishing second and MVP Giannis finishing third. And now we've reached the 2020-2021 NBA season. If you are even vaguely familiar with what is about to happen, this should not come to any surprise to you at all. We are entering the reign of terror of Nikola Jokic. Now, I want you to pay attention here. You see that 52.3 on the Roundball range? That's important. That's the highest that we've ever seen this score up to this point. And it makes sense. 45.5 PRA, a 130 offensive rating. Absolutely ridiculous. Almost 65% true shooting, and led the league that year in offensive win shares. Valiant efforts from everybody else involved, but really not that close. Damian Lillard finishes second, and then we have Giannis finishing third. Just a slight step back from last year, again with a 52, Nikola Jokic, and again, really not that close by everybody else. Giannis Antetokounmpo gets second place again, and Joel Embiid gets third. Voter fatigue kicked in this year. Joel Embiid wins the MVP, and I'm not saying he didn't deserve it. I'm just saying he deserved it less than Nikola Jokic. But Nikola Jokic almost makes up for it by getting nearly a 54 on the Roundball range. And again, just utterly ridiculous numbers. Had I not seen this season happen in front of my eyes, I would have said that this was the greatest season by any individual player on offense ever. 46 PRA, 134 offensive rating, ridiculous. 70.1% true shooting percentage. The MVP, Joel Embiid, does get second in Offensive Player of the Year award, and then, again, interesting name alert, Domantas Sabonis with a third place finish. Last year, 23-24, Nikola Jokic wins MVP and Offensive Player of the Year, nearly grabbing a 53 on the Roundball range, followed by Giannis with a 51, and Luka Doncic making his first appearance in the top three with a 50.68 Roundball range. And now we're here in present day. One of the more highly contested NBA MVP debates ever. The reason that I made this video in the first place. There is no surprise here, though. Nikola Jokic had the greatest offensive season we have ever seen in a player ever. Nikola Jokic averaged a triple-double, has a 52.5 PRA, a 133 offensive rating, 66% true shooting, 12.7 offensive win share, and almost a 10 offensive box plus minus. Now, SGA was pretty far behind him as far as this Roundball range is concerned, but he did have a very good offensive season for himself. And then Giannis again, third in MVP voting, third in this year's award as well. So after diving in 40 plus years of data, what do we have to show for it? More numbers. The highest Roundball range ever was, again, without a doubt, this year's Nikola Jokic. Absolutely insanity. He nearly scored a 55. On the opposite end of that spectrum, however, we have defensive menace Ben Wallace on that 03-04 Pistons team. Nikola Jokic does not have the highest PRA, however. Luka Doncic has that from last year. That was when he averaged almost 34, 9 and 9. The highest offensive rating is, again, no surprise, Nikola Jokic with a 134. And again, I have to mention how ridiculous it is that the highest true shooting percentage we've ever seen in this experiment was 70.1 from the same season with Nikola Jokic. But for our highest offensive win share ever, we have to go back to the second ever reign of terror with Michael Jordan in that 1987-1988 season. And then the highest offensive box plus minus ever is the unanimous MVP season from Steph Curry. And now it's time for the good stuff. More numbers. I'm going to start with all of the names who made a top 3 finish but never won the award. There are some really interesting names on here, but the most interesting to me is the point guard Chris Paul, never breaking that glass ceiling and finishing second 4 different times. Giannis also has never broken that glass ceiling, but has finished second 3 times and third 3 times. I'm going to level with you. When I was going through all this data, it appears that I have stumbled upon some polar bears because Domantas Sabonis, John Stockton, and Kevin McHale all have one appearance on here and never again. Kobe Bryant is also a very interesting one to me. He finished second once and third twice. I expected him to be on here a couple times, especially that season where he averaged 35 points. I figured that was a shoo-in. I do think that there are some interesting omissions, the biggest one being Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo never once placed in the top 3 in this award ever. And when I thought of offensive players of the year, people who can just put the ball in the hoop, people who can generate offense, Carmelo Anthony was one of the first people to come to mind, so it really shocked me that he never ended up on this list. And now let's talk some winners. Peja Stojakovic, unfortunately, I think, is a polar bear here. He had one first-place finish and never finished in the top 3 ever again. Same thing with Tracy McGrady. I expected him to be here a lot. I know that he scored a lot. I feel like his career may have been just too short, though. His prime may have been too short to really make an impact on this list. Another funny tidbit, Amari Stoudemire wins 2 of these awards, and that's all he does. He only wins or he never shows up again. We have some usual suspects at the bottom of this list. Larry Bird, Dirk Nowitzki, David Robinson, Charles Barkley, Steve Nash. Like, they make sense to be here. I expected them to have potentially more wins, but finishing as many times as they did in the top 3 is still really impressive. Potentially the most shocking thing to me, maybe even more shocking than Carmelo Anthony not being on this list or T-Mac only finishing first 1 time, is that Kevin Durant won one of these awards and finished second 6 different times. Still absolutely incredible. He was a top 3 player for 8 different years, and that is way more than a lot of the best players ever get to say. And then everyone above Amari Stoudemire are some of the greatest to ever do it, without a doubt. Steph Curry's got 3 top 3 finishes. James Harden has 6. Magic Johnson, the first reign of terror, had 8 different top 3 finishes. And then to top it all off, we have the 4 true reigns of terror. Nikola Jokic is so interesting to me because the year prior to him starting to win MVPs and Offensive Player of the Year awards, he was like 9th in MVP voting. He wasn't even close to winning this thing. And then for 5 straight years has decided, I'm just going to be the greatest offensive engine this game has ever seen him in the history of the game. Nikola Jokic has won this award 5 straight times. I'm sure it's not his last, but whenever he does finish in second or third or even outside the top 3, it's going to be a big deal, at least for me personally. And then we have the late 90s to 2000s reign of terror with Shaquille O'Neal finishing 8 different times in the top 3. The greatest player of all time, LeBron James, having 5 first place finishes, 2 seconds, and 3 thirds. And now, definitively, the greatest offensive player in the history of the game, Michael Jordan, 7 first place trophies, 1 second, and 2 thirds. So after all that data, what did we learn? At least for me, I don't know about you, I have a solidified thought now that the best stats do not equal the best player, because we have 40 plus years of data on our hands. The MVP only won the Offensive Player of the Year award 19 times. So for next year, when we start doing this debate of, well, he has better offensive numbers, that means that he's the MVP, I would like to take just a little bit of consideration into all of this effort that I've put into this video and this formula, and maybe consider that the best offensive player doesn't mean MVP. I know that I will personally be using this metric for my own reasons. At the end of the year, I make my own set of awards, and one of those awards is the Too Hard to Guard award, that I use this specific formula to figure out who wins that. Now, this was a lot of hard work. I'm sure this is going to be a very long video. I'm sorry, but it was so much data to get into. I very much enjoy the process of going through all this data, but it does take a while. Now, depending on if this video does well, if it is supported well, if you guys like this idea, I could potentially go back to the very start of the league and find out the Offensive Player of the Year from each of those seasons leading up to the 82-83 season. The formula will have to change a little bit because the advanced metrics aren't supported all the way back in the 1940s, but I think that, again, if this video does well, I could go back and make this a complete history of Offensive Players of the Year. I'm glad to be back. Glad to be back in the swing of YouTube videos. I'm hoping to do more of them. I miss making long-form content. Short form is really cool. It's nice and easy, but I really like getting into the weeds of long form content. So there's going to be more to come. But again, I appreciate everybody stopping by. I appreciate you clicking on this video, potentially giving a like, watching all the way to the end. If you are interested in keeping up with me, there are going to be links in the description. I've got all the short form places, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, TikTok. I have a Discord community that I would love for you to join. Everything is going to be in the description. But that's going to be it for me today. Who are you surprised didn't make this list or didn't make a top 3 finish? Let me know down in the comments below. Again, while you're down there, check those links in the description. I've got a lot of places. I am everywhere. If you can think of a platform, I'm probably there. So I'd love it if you give me a follow. That's going to do it for me today. Be kind, tell somebody you love them, and I'll see you in the next one.